voting shares into the trust. And I have 13 of the Canterbury people come and put their shares in the trust. Okay, so far, all I've done is that they're getting trust money and I have their shares in the stock company. So far, so good, makes sense. But what happens? So every year, you vote on a new CEO of the company, right? The board gets together and votes on a new CEO. So here at the M&M Mars Company, they've set out 20 seats. 9 of them show up. 11 people are missing. I come in and I say, hello, I'm from the Yummy Trust. I have 11 votes. Let's vote on who's going to be the new CEO for your company. And guess who gets to be the new CEO? Me, okay? Or one of my flunkies. And so then I go ahead and grab the little M&M guy, squeeze them, and go away. Pat the little green one on her head, and, run, okay? Same thing, I come over to the C's company, only they've set out, chairs for 10, they've got donuts for 10. Only 3 people have shown up. I come in, I give it, guess what? Time to vote. I got 7 votes, and what happens? I vote in myself, and I take 7 of the donuts. Okay, and so what's happening? By having the majority of the voting shares control, what have I done? I effectively have taken control of each of the companies. I haven't bought them out, but I have control of the companies. And of course, by having control, I can now do price fixing. And by price fixing them, the profit on those goes up, which benefits the people who put their shares into the trust company. See how that works? So as a result, the trusts were mechanisms to basically hide mergers. They were used in order to control multiple different companies in the same sector. That's why when you see these phrases, the steel trust, the rail trust, each of these did the oil trust. These trusts were basically mechanisms to take control over segments of the economy without actually really doing a merger. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. Now I know that's probably the most complicated thing we're covering today, but does this make sense as to how the trust things work? Okay. And so that's why they start talking about trust busting, is because that basically all these trusts are controlling the vote. And mind you, most of these trusts, they're half the time, they're like 2 guys in an attic somewhere that have called themselves a trust company, and usually one of them already controls one of the companies. It's not like they're all going to an independent company. Half the time it starts with one company that puts its voting shares into the trust and then goes down the line to try and get 1 or 2 other people merged into it. Okay, so it wasn't always like hostile takeovers. It was sometimes just used, but it was a way again to set up this price fixing and to gain a monopoly. So now what are some of the other things that are being used? So these are so far the economic methods. There are actually some managerial methods that are being used too, some changes in the factory. One of the most important was the creation of middle managers. Now, has anybody here ever been a manager in a store? Anybody been a manager? Okay, where's your managership?
I worked at a pottery studio.
A pottery studio, and yours was a? Okay. And so, did anybody else was a manager? Okay. Now, so here's the thing. What do managers do? What do you get to do as a manager?
Set policy.
Okay, you set policy. And do you have control over the money as a manager? Can you actually say all of your employees get a $1,000 bonus at the end of the year?
As middle manager, no.
No. Okay. You don't get to actually give them the huge bonuses. Instead, your boss sets you targets and all this, right? You're supposed to meet those targets. You may be given a pool of resources and they say, well, you can only have so many hours and they need to sell X number of widgets, right? Or whatever it happens to be. See, now what the manager did was 2 things for these companies. On the one hand, as companies grew and became multi-state ventures and all this, there was no way that one owner could actually keep track of all the hell that was going on in each one of them, right? And so managers became really important to funnel information, to become a hierarchical power structure where you could say, okay, what's the best practices here, and maybe we can copy it in different places, right? Maybe we can see what's working here and what's not working there. But there is a second function which was a little less joyous, okay? And the thing is, the boss could set certain policies, could set certain goals. And as a manager, you could only tweak it, right, within certain boundaries. But of course, say that they set unrealistic goals, and now your workers are having to work for more hours, or for less pay, or with no bonus. Who gets blamed? The manager, okay? Because you're the one who's told them you have to do this. And not just that, when somebody supposedly is going to be disciplined, who's the person who yells at them? The manager. So who gets blamed for all this shit? The manager, not the owner, but the manager. And so, of course, if the workers complain too much, what can the owner do? Fire the manager and put in a new one, even if they have the exact same instructions as the old manager, okay? So one of the things is that managerial stuff became really interesting, and we've even seen this evolve much in the United States, where, I mean, for example, in the 50s, if you started with a company, did you change companies all the time and all that? No, but nowadays, if you go into management, if you get an MBA degree, are you expected to stay with one company as a middle manager for your entire career? In fact, what frequently happens, you hop from company to company to company, and it may not make the same sort of pleasure. It may not be in the same kind of business, but you're saying that the manager is kind of independent of the business that they do. And they're almost expendable, sometimes almost like hired guns. And so it's a very interesting way that the manager's role has evolved. You know, I have my exchange student brother Cedric, who has his MBA from Cornell. He's currently working for Johnson & Johnson, and he's a relatively high-level guy, but he says he really wants to get to the director position, but on the other hand, directors don't last very long, apparently, and they go poof, you know, and then you have to go and find another company because you get blamed for something, poof, and then off you go. So it's a very interesting kind of situation where it changes the nature of the way we look at business, and this whole middle management, white-collar set of professions, which really hadn't existed, a whole new set and layer of types of people in business.
Sometimes they even do it on purpose.
Well, of course, yeah.
My sister was hired by the Mandalay Bay when they first opened to set up the buffet.
Oh, okay.
And she had a lot of experience at it. She was really good. They gave her really good pay. And as soon as she set it up and had the grand opening 3 months later, they fired her and hired somebody with less experience for less money for money.
Right. Yes, well, that's fun too. So that's good as well. What else do we have? Okay, so there's a manager. The other one was the moving assembly line. Now, we kind of already have said that when it comes to factories and industrialization, in our mindset, the moving assembly line is like the image of industrialization. Now, mind you, the moving assembly line is not a 19th century thing. It's not until the 20th century that it occurs. And so most of what we tend to think of as the prime era of the Industrial Revolution has already passed, but nonetheless, it's interesting how we see this as the main image of industrialism, right? So sometimes our chronology is a little odd. But what is the moving assembly line? How does that work? Well, first of all, who is behind the moving assembly line? Henry Ford. Okay, Henry Ford, who made, of course, our premier automaker inside the United States. He once said of the Model T, you can have the Model T in any color that you want, as long as you love black. And so, very cool. And so that was neat. Now, Ford, when he was making these cars, found out there was a problem. Making a car took a lot of different steps. And for someone to be trained to do all the different kind of things to make the pieces of a car required somebody with a lot of different kinds of engineering skills. And so they would actually be in a large warehouse, and they had the car in the middle, and they'd be running back and forth and doing the pieces and the welding and this and that. And it took forever to put a car together. Indeed, they could only make handfuls of cars each week. And of course, the demand for cars was going up a lot faster than the speed for which they could build it. And so Ford kind of pondered on this, and he came up with kind of an idea. He thought about, okay, what is, think about like when you're making something, you all made something from IKEA, I'm sure, or something similar, where you have the little instruction sets, right? There's step by step by step, and it just only has he kind of almost unfolded a set of IKEA instructions in his brain. And he said, okay, let's think about if we make the car, let's put it down into a series of steps. And let's first of all figure out what step takes the longest period of time. Maybe it's welding in the seat of the car. Maybe it's putting the crank and lowering down the engine. Whatever it happens to be. Figure out what that is. Does that take 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 minutes? What's the longest period that it takes to do a single step in the car? And he said, okay, let's take that as our base. And then let's work forward and back, and then assign jobs that take exactly that same amount of time. And then instead of all the workers crowding around one place, we'll create a conveyor belt. And every X number of minutes, however long it takes the longest number of jobs to take, we will move